Is it taxes or is it money? Well, I'm going anyway. Let's talk about something important. Put that coffee down. Coffee is for closers only. Do you think I'm fucking with you? I am not fucking with you. I'm here from downtown. I'm here from Big Podcast, and I'm here on a mission of mercy. Your name, Jordan?
Yeah.
You call yourself a podcaster, you son of a bitch?
Not in polite company, no.
You certainly don't, pal, because the good news is you're fired. The bad news is you've got just 1 week to regain your podcasting spot starting tonight. Tonight's shit. Oh, have I got your attention now? Good, because we're adding a little something to this month's podcast contest. As you all know, first prize is a fucking slap in the face. Second prize, a set of steak knives. Third prize, you're fired. You get the picture? You're laughing now? You got leads. Big Podcast paid good money for these leads. Get their name, get those ads out there and sell them. You cannot close the ads you're given. You can't close shit. You are shit. Hit the bricks, pal, and beat it, because you're going out.
Well, I'm really glad to be introducing our new sponsor today, Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is no, we're not doing that. Hey, Dave.
Nice. Fuck you. That's my name. You know why. I could go on for hours. This is the highlight of the movie. This is the best bit of the whole movie.
It's the best bit of this shouty man movie, where everyone's so grumpy. Oh, these poor... Anyway, welcome, Dave. Welcome to this very shouty...
I feel like I threw you in at the deep end there. I was expecting a bit more... Let's dissect the improv here. I was expecting a bit more of a...
Did you want me to embody a character? Well, I can only work with what I'm given.
You weren't bad, Sam. You weren't bad, Sam. You weren't bad.
An experienced improv artist such as myself is maybe just working at a higher level than you are, Dave. You know, so
You see this watch? Do you know how much this watch costs?
Stop blowing the mic out. You need to lean back when you shout. God damn it! Hey everyone, we're in a combative mood as we pile into another episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, the podcast where we watch movies and then shout into the mic loudly about them. And let's get into today's movie, this week's movie, where we have.
We can fix that in post, right?
There's only so much that is possible with modern even with the AI world that we live in. So we're talking Glengarry Glenross, a baffling title to this movie, which I think is based off a play, perhaps.
I think we talked about this recently, didn't we? I'm going to say it. Was the movie called The Man Who Wasn't There? Is that correct?
The Coen Brothers movie, The Man Who Wasn't There.
We talked about this. I think that has to win the worst name for a movie ever made.
The movie title that wasn't there. I think
this goes in. I think this has to go in the Imaginary Podcast movie title Hall of Fame for like. And what could that possibly tell you about the movie? Like.
It's not recognizable.
It's not even the fucking company they work at.
It's not recognizable. It's not the company they work at. It doesn't really mean anything, and it's also. I suppose the point of it is that it is meaningless in the movie as well. It doesn't actually mean anything in the movie because all of what they're doing is total bullshit. So I don't know. But what I do know, Dave, is that we are here to talk about this movie. And, have you seen this before? Have you seen this movie before? No, so this is my first viewing. It's my first viewing of this movie. It's kind of a funny one. Like, where do you want to begin with this? Where do we begin? Because not, getting into the sausage make.
I've got it.
Okay.
Like many movies from the 1930s, this was adapted from a play. Wait, 1992? Sorry, what?
Yes.
This is adapted from a play, which is odd. I think there's quite a lot of this in the 90s as well, and the 1930s, where it's like, we're just going to adapt this play, and it's going to be a play on screen. It's like, well, we kind of stopped doing that 50 years ago, guys, because the art form had advanced beyond just filming a play, which to a certain extent is what this movie is. So I say, let's talk about Mammoth, giant turd, and then let's get into maybe some of the more fun, more talkable about aspects. Don't worry, we will get to what piece of shit Kevin Spacey is also, but we'll do Mammoth first.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a play from 1984. It won a Pulitzer Prize.
White Man in 1984.
84. I mean, that really is that's the Bo Burnham White Guy 1985 song, and it's so relevant right here. It's one of those stories that I think is very much fundamental, I think, to a lot of the American psyche. It's about capitalism, it's about work, it's about bootstraps, it's about doing what you need to succeed, and that winning is by bringing together wealth and doing all the other things that
screwing the other guy and getting money.
Yeah. So, like, we're at this level when we're talking about this movie, and we should probably introduce it a little bit. Basically, we're in this is the office, and it's full of these pretty repellent, obnoxious white guys, and they're all trying to sell shit. And we don't really, what they're selling.
It's land. It's land.
Basically, land. It's
selling land.
But it's all snake oil, isn't it?
It's a scam. It's a scam.
They're ripping people off.
There's a big connection between this movie and Wolf of Wall Street, and where Wolf of Wall Street understands that, I think, in a more coherent way than this movie does, that they're the baddies. Like Wolf of Wall Street understands that they're selling shares, and they're selling shit shares. It's not like as if the stock market is somehow actually real or
I know.
But the idea is that they're selling stuff. They're selling shares that they know are never ever going to appreciate in value, and it's a con. And then this movie is a slightly different flavor of that, where everyone wants to believe they can strike it rich by buying land, in this case, in this movie, in Arizona, and speculate on land. I mean, America is built on land speculation. The whole fucking country, the whole financial institution of America is built on land speculation.
Yeah. And only because
the psyche, in a way that it isn't here, because a lot of the land is still owned by those fucking French people who came over here 1,000 years ago.
Don't worry though, because they learned the lesson from us in all the colonies that we managed to steal from the natives. So basically, but
I want to really hit that cultural thing there, Samuel. Like you are right. I think this idea of land speculation and the idea of that in America it looms so large in a way that it just isn't the case here. That country is so big and there's so much land. So the idea is that these fucking tobacco-y, whiskey swilling old men in this office, they're all salesmen, and the idea is that they're shifting like land packages in Arizona, and the idea is that they're basically like hoodwinking investors. The land is never going to be worth more money than they paid, and it's kind of like a tacit thing in this movie, isn't it? That the product doesn't matter. It's more about the sale and the pitch and conning the person that you're selling to, and
getting the sales, because as we learn at the start of this movie through the very impassioned Alec Baldwin speech that you just brilliantly satire.
No, that was me, listener. That was in fact me doing that speech.
It's just how he talks all the time. We didn't get
Alec Baldwin for that. He is free, but we didn't get him.
It's amazing. Well,
he'll take anything right now.
That basically whoever wins this contest, the sales contest, is going to get a Cadillac, and whoever loses is going to get fired. And this is like it's not a bad idea. Like it's a really interesting idea in terms of how we explore what's going to go on in that situation, and how we take these characters and apply them to apply the pressure on them to see how that's going to end up. And it is fascinating. So like there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here, and it clearly comes from a position of
kind of movie, and I like this kind of movie. And
yeah,
and again, we'll talk about the play thing in a second, but that you kind of can't get away from that in this movie. It's kind of like a one set movie, really, and
even the way the camera, some of the camera work is like we're pulled back quite a lot to give the actors the space to roam,
to
almost
give them
like
a stage, basically.
around a stage. You know, like there's
Yeah.
lots of edifices here that I think are there to kind of give you that sense. The scenes are all quite small. They're quite closed down in terms of the scope of them because it's about the conversations that are happening, and rather than stunts and all the other things that you might expect from.
Yeah, it's a smaller. The scope of the story is a lot smaller than a lot of the movies we've done lately, especially in that.
Compared to Wolf
know,
of Wall
just-
Street, like
Wolf of Wall Street's a good
which is a
comp,
similar
I think,
story, but that
because
is big.
It's
isn't
kind
it?
of
That's
about the
big.
same sort of financial stuff, really,
Yeah.
and the characters are. What I wanted to hit was that like none of these characters are likable, and they're not supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can both agree on that. At least is that you don't like or root for any of these characters, and the movie kind of isn't really asking you to.
Yeah.
It's not giving you a lot of reason to kind of, and it's not because it's not giving you a lot. It's not giving you a lot of reason to root for any of these characters because we get so little outside of the four walls of this office.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a small, focused character piece at its heart, and I think the strength of that is
It's a
clear to
bottle
see.
movie.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is. Let's talk about some of these because so we've got this idea. Then we've got this idea that this movie is about what's happening in this small little universe that these guys occupy, and I think for me, some of these performances I think are like amazing. Jack Lemmon has to be, I think, the best performance in this movie because he's kind of known for playing these kind of everyman type. We've seen him in Something Like It Hot. The Apartment is another great movie that he's in that kind of similar, working schlub type of characters, and they're just trying to get by, and they're kind of funny and a little bit pathetic, and you kind of the humor that's tied up in that. And I think this is to me where like there's a lot of strength in this movie. Is all these characters, all the characters that we see, and the performances that we see are very distinct, and you can identify them, I think, really well in terms of the type of person that they are. You have those kind of maybe archetypes in your head. But all throughout the movie, I think all the performances that were given are top tier. These are actors working, I think, really at a high level to sell a lot of this stuff. Because, like The Wolf of Wall Street, which I think Scorsese clearly would be influenced, by this movie, we get them to do a lot of crazy shit or act and say a lot of crazy shit and do stuff that's quite unrealistic. And like I didn't feel like I connected on a human level with these characters at all. This world is incredibly remote to me, and thank God. But nonetheless, I was fascinated by what the actors were doing and the characters were saying. That's hard to do, isn't it? That's hard.
It is. Let's talk about Mamet because we teased that and then didn't talk about Mamet. So, like I said, this is a play. David Mamet is a gigantic piece of shit, and we don't need to get into that. But pretty successful guy.
Seems to be. I mean, getting into a massive piece of shit would be maybe the preference of me because he certainly isn't.
I will just say it's maybe one of these things where he's a really good screenwriter. Obviously, he did the screenplays for Postman Always Rings Twice, The Untouchables, Hannibal. We don't need to get into loads of that, but he's a good screenwriter and had major success with a lot of the plays, obviously, that he wrote. Quite prominent guy, but maybe has also done a lot of shit and said a lot of shit.
Yeah, it kind of goes to maybe to the more some of the more right wing elements that that are in this movie. But yeah, I think there's I think you see a lot of this, and this is maybe jumping ahead to where actually I'm going to say let's pause a second here. I think we should hold this because I think this is the end point. I think this is the end point when we talk about Mamet. I think this is like, oh, and by the way, because I don't think it's necessary. I think it's going to influence our discussion if we talk about him now. Because we've been saying,
whatever you want to do, baby. I'm just here for the ride.
Yeah, I think let's talk about the characters. Let's go through some of the characters and some of the performances, and then we can get into the big argument they're into, and then we can finish. Oh, and by the way, this guy.
No arguments, Sam.
This guy's
harmonious. We're on the same page.
Yeah, I know.
We're in agreement. He's a douchebag. Okay.
He's a douchebag.
If we can't do that, let's talk about Kevin Spacey.
Let's talk about Kevin Spacey with that. So let's talk about Kevin Spacey then, because this this is an important character. Obviously, Kevin Spacey's a dickhead and has his own ecosystem of terror that he has used to, facilitate his own horrible existence. But this character is important, isn't it? I think the character is kind of central to this because is he the antagonist?
Kind of. It's a very typical Kevin Spacey performance, where I mean, this guy pulled the biggest con on the public for 30 years you can possibly imagine. He played a piece of shit in every film made between 1985 and 2015, and no one thought to look into this guy's personal life or what's he up to.
He's all just an actor. How dare you do that? You can't accuse him.
Too much acting. But a lot of his early Kevin Spacey performances. But I think, do you know what? For this conversation and not to discount any of the people that Kevin Spacey has assaulted over the years, but I think it's important to kind of put that to one side when discussing this movie, because there are other people in this movie. Other people made it, and you can't let Kevin Spacey's shitheadedness kind of just drown everything that he ever touched. Now, Kevin Spacey's performance in this movie, I think, is quite prototypical of Kevin Spacey in this era. He's kind of Weasley. He's kind of a nerd. You don't like him. I mean, you don't like Kevin Spacey in any of the fucking movies he's in. And that's kind of the point. But
yeah.
I think he's less the antagonist. He's kind of the characters in this movie believe that Kevin Spacey is the antagonist. Mm-hmm. But I would say that for me, I didn't really feel like Kevin Spacey was kind of a focal point of what the movie was about. He's more kind of there as a foil to be he's just the manager. Foil. He works for the corporation. He's doing the job, and he's not a salesman. And it's an interesting one, really. And there's a lot of good lines, especially with Lemon and Spacey. I think play off each other very well. When Lemon is groveling to him, Spacey's I want 10% of the commission, and I want $50 a lead, and I want the $50 now. And he's I think all of that's very good, and you kind of need a character that's quite despicable like Spacey for that.
And you need someone for our quote unquote protagonist cast and the ensemble that we see to bounce off against, and to be, because we get Alec Baldwin at the start, and you might if he'd carried on being in the movie, you might have said that
he's too big,
but he kind of disappears, and it's interesting because that character was not in the play and was brought in. I think in movie making, you need to be very, very clear, and so you have that conversation. It isn't passed down in a memo. You have he's literally sitting there with his brass balls, some 80s power move, so all of this is. But I think the question of who's the antagonist and how does that relationship influence the main cast, and whether or not there actually is an antagonist in this, which I think is an interesting thought as well. I think there's a good argument made that there isn't really an antagonist.
I think Kevin Spacey in this movie is antagonistic.
Yes, but he
without
does
necessarily
not...
being an antagonist, because I agree.
Yes.
I don't think there is an antagonist in this movie. I think because of the fact because of the play-like nature of it, I think it's more just kind of a story we're watching rather than a traditional movie arc where we have a force to overcome. Because I would argue that no one overcomes anything in this movie. It's kind of a movie.
It's kind of exactly, and that's an important thing, and it goes back to what we've been saying already about it being small, about being focused, and actually not about a lot. You know, there isn't. I'm not saying there's not depth here. What I'm saying is that actually we're talking about fairly small time business. Like this isn't tens of millions of dollars, and the high stakes world that we see in Wolf of Wall Street is actually very small. So if we don't have an antagonist, and we do have, I think, a fairly impressive ensemble. We've got Kevin Spacey is acting this kind of a foil. That's a good way of describing it. You've got Jack Lemmon as he's kind of like he's
Gil
a bit
from The Simpsons.
He's Gil. He's a bit more pathetic, isn't he? You know, he's a bit more kind of down on his luck, and he's older as well. And I think that adds another layer of like he's still having to do this at his age. Is kind of the movie's attitude. And I think as you go along the cast, Ed Harris he's a bit more of a, I'm not taking this shit from you. Like, I don't think he necessarily is bought in to the mystique of what they're doing.
It's a paycheck, isn't it? Ed Harris seems the character who's the most on the make. He's not interested in being a salesman. He's interested in making money, as evidenced by the fact that he is the guy behind the plot to steal the leads and sell them.
Yeah.
You've got Alan Arkin, who kind of like, I actually think doesn't have a lot to do in this movie.
He's a bit underused, isn't he?
But he kind of feels like he's the fourth banana. Like he's kind of doing the same thing as Jack Lemmon's doing, but not as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think because he's not given as much, and he's just plain. He's not in the third act of this movie. If you would call that a third act, he's not in the final act of this movie.
Yeah, him and Ed Harris kind of disappear a little bit, don't they? So that leaves, I think, Al Pacino as being kind of the main.
Al Pacino,
the main kind of. I think he's probably the closest thing we get to a protagonist, and the reason I say that is because I think he has the most agency. He's the character who I believe is fully bought in to this way of life, this hustling salesman kind of. Jack Lemmon is a bit. He kind of towards the end of the movie, he emphasizes it a little bit, I think. But really, I think Al Pacino is the core of. He's
the best salesman. I mean, that's established at the very beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know who the protagonist of this movie is. If I pushed, I would say Jack Lemmon gets the most screen time, I think. But yeah, Al Pacino is certainly doing the most work in this movie. Like, actual work in the movie. He is the big swinging dick. He's in line to win the Cadillac. I don't even know how much is the Cadillac. It's not important. And he's doing a very shouty kind of latter Al Pacino, chewing the scenery. This is an interesting point in his career. It's so long. The man is still acting now. Please retire, please.
I know.
Al
Jesus
Pacino.
God.
How many more wings on your house could you possibly need? But he's the most competent of the salesmen, and we kind of see that in the way that he's the only one we actually see making a sale, and it's interesting for a movie that's about salesmen. There's not a lot of sales. There's not a lot of anything. I think this is kind of an interesting movie in terms of there are no stakes. There's very little movement. I think intentionally because it wants to be this kind of sweaty, tense, sort of standoffish kind of movie. There's not a lot of movement anywhere.
And that's where I think Al Pacino's character really embodies it, because he's the one who's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of showing us how sales works, and in a fairly limited way, as you've said, but also I think embodying the bravado and buying into this idea that what they're doing is, I'm not going to say noble. I don't think he necessarily thinks himself as having a sense of nobility, but that there is something valuable in what he's doing, and if that value is only towards himself, that's
the cop thing. It's the cop thing, Sam, and I definitely think that is on show in this movie. But it's the what's the term did you use? Honor among thieves. It's the army vets thing. It's the cop thing. It's the doctor.
We've got to
thing.
stick
Like,
together.
we do the same job, and it's people identifying with their job. Like, you're the best damn doctor I've ever seen, and it's like, it's a very movie thing where because the movie doesn't expand beyond its own premise, so therefore, like, and people like this absolutely do exist, but you know, like, what do you do for a living? It's kind of like, you specifically, is it like oh, I'm a comms officer and I'll die a comms officer, cut me and I bleed comms. Like, that's not true of every job, but it's true of sales, and it's true of, like, do you know what I mean? That's why I say doctors and cops, and like, there are certain professions where it's kind of like this subculture of like, we're salesmen and
and I think I think that's what
we're grifters. Essentially, that's the thing. It's grifters, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's what the movie. I think this is where I think we hit the a really interesting point about this movie. So we've got all these great performances, and we've got, I think, this interesting idea and this competition that needs to go on. And to me, this is a point of divergence, that we could go into a comedy romp where they're all trying to sabotage each other with, like, you know, banana skins on the floor, or they're putting on fake mustaches to go and annoy their clients and say, oh yeah. Like, we could go down that route, and that could be the zany kind of family comedy, or we could go down the route that the movie actually does go down, which is, we're going to get into some real nasty shit, and it's going to get kind of a bit dodgy, but also to the very point you're making, is that I think this movie is about an honor among thieves. Kind of, I think there's a glorification here of what it means to be a salesperson, and what it means to be making money, and for capitalism and all, like, and how much that is on a positive or negative, I think, is something we can discuss. But to me, the very core of this movie is you have to have a really you have to embody, I think, a lot of what these people think, and you have to take it on and just say, yeah, okay, I'm with you. You think this is a great idea. Let's see where we go. And the question is how much you can do that. How much as a viewer, can you go, this is great, this is really funny, or this is really entertaining, or this is depressing as shit.
You've raised a really interesting point there, Sam, and it comes down to interpretation, and I think let's lay it out here. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think the movie can ask you to believe that these characters believe that without asking you to believe that.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where I think the interpretation comes down, because I watched this film. Obviously, we've discussed this before. I watched this film and I look at it of being like, these characters believe that, and isn't that pathetic? And that being kind of like what the movie's trying to convey, is that these sweaty, pathetic, useless, incompetent men who, by the end of the movie, every one of them has like committed petty crimes and fucked up, and nobody has jobs on Monday. Like that's the end of this movie. Nobody is coming back to work on Monday because you're all fired. But at the same time, like you said, these characters believe in this honor among thieves, and they believe in the game and the con, and the con is really the word. You know, Jack Lemmon really is dyed in the wool and believes that there is like a cadre of salesmen, and there's a way that salesmen operate, and there's a way to the game. And I think they do call it the game a couple of times in this movie, and that really is like part of it. And you see all of that and you accept it, and the interpretation comes down to whether you think the movie is kind of lending credence and aggrandizing that idea, or whether the movie is kind of like standing back and saying, yeah, but it's all a bit ridiculous, isn't it? Like that we all worship at the altar of capitalism, which is very much is what the characters in this movie are doing. But the interpretation question is kind of like, but does that mean that the movie is saying that, or does that mean that the movie is saying that is bad? And that is a real knife edge.
It is a real knife edge. I tell you what. So let's keep that point in our head. Then it's about interpretation because that's really important. Let's talk about some of the different ways that this could be interpreted because I think that there's you could interpret this as an anti-capitalism movie. Like spoilers, I don't, but you could because
You could. You'd be wrong, but you'd
be an idiot too. But you could because actually the whole point of the movie could be interpreted as basically that. Wow, these people are under the cosh and this guy, one of them is going to get fired, and so they're trapped in this system that requires them to exploit people for their own security to get food on their tables, and that's a grand history of capitalism right there, isn't it? You know, there has to be a loser, otherwise nobody can be a winner, and that's the whole system. The problem is, let me lay it out because I think the problem is that actually, I don't think we lean far enough into that for that to be the interpretation that I believe is coming from the filmmakers and what the movie says.
This is a great way of doing it because I would argue the opposite, but I would also say that I don't think the movie leans far enough my way either.
Yeah. Yeah.
The opposite of yours is that this movie is setting up these characters in this world where we all bow down at the altar of capitalism. You've got Nepo Baby, Kevin Spacey's the office manager. You've got all of these grizzled old men who believe in their own fucking farts, and they're going to go out and they are going to defraud people. They're going to sell, and they're going to close. Coffees for closers. I love that line from this movie.
The shit.
It's wonderful. Alec Baldwin, in a movie of standout performances, I think it's only second to Jack Lemmon. But in this movie, and so it kind of presents to you this kind of like this altar of capitalism which exists, and these characters are fully bought into, and kind of like, you know, sell. You've got to close. You've got to make money, or you're fired, and they're sweaty, and they're drinking, and they're smoking, and they're stressed, and they're going on calls, and they're going around to all these poor people's houses, and like, they can't afford to buy land. Look at this house; it looks like shit.
I know.
All of that's on the page and on the screen, and it's kind of disgusting, isn't it? Like, visually, you're watching it, and you're like, these guys are quite pathetic. Like, the fact that they believe the things that they're saying, the fact that they act the way that they're acting, the fact that they believe this is the only way to make a living. Do you know what I mean? The only way. Even Alec Baldwin's speech at the begining. Look at this watch. This watch. I could make $15,000 tonight. Blah blah blah. All of that. All of the money amounts of like this. You wouldn't say that to the guy in the $6,000 suit. You know, like, it's so much of it is kind of this crass. Crass is the word. This crass. Way that salesmen act, and everything is about the dollar amount because your whole life revolves around that. All of that's on the screen, and for me, the way I viewed it was that is ridiculous. That is patently ridiculous and pathetic, and kind of like why would you do that? And then the ending of the movie being that everyone fails is also kind of like a doubling down on that, for me, that interpretation that this is all quite seedy and inherently like not sustainable. And I would, but to sort of lean towards what you were saying, it doesn't go far enough, I think, in that.
Yeah.
But that's my interpretation. It's interesting that it's so diametrically opposed.
Well, I don't think it is opposed. I think what we're running on the same track here, and we're diverging slightly because I think it's. But right, let's take a step back a second because we're saying that I don't think it's an anti-capitalism movie. I think probably you would agree with that it's not anti-capitalism.
I don't think it's an anti-capitalism movie.
So that's an interesting point, right? So the next phase then is just what you described, which is whether or not these characters are through the course of the movie, whether or not they fail or whether or not the outcome that results kind of supports the view that these guys are doing something that the honor that they feel among these thieves is genuine. Because my second point is that I think actually this movie is glorifying the way that these men behave. It's glorifying them in that you've got people like Alec Baldwin who is kind of like the over-the-top glorification, and is kind of there to say, yeah, he's a bit silly.
He's a very mid-80s character, isn't he?
Yes, 100%. He's basically, Jack Donaghy from 30 Rock, which adds in a whole other layer.
Well, he's DiCaprio from Wolf of Wall Street. Like,
exactly, it's the same character.
He's the winner. He's the guy who's made loads of money.
But bring it back to Pacino, because I think if Alec Baldwin is the over-the-top one that you could say, no, they're taking the piss out of him. I think this character is supposed to be admirable. I think this character is supposed to bring a level of Al Pacino gravitas to this role and this presence, because he is there. As much as he's fucking this guy over, we get a lot of speeches about the game, about, hey, remember when I taught you this stuff, kid? And I think there is actually a real kind of sense of that these men are doing something that is well trodden, it's part of the grift. Lemon says to Spacey when Spacey fucks over Al Pacino's character, a man is his job and you're fucked at yours. And I think that to me really is the movie. I think the movie believes its own farce, as it were, because
this is
because
I don't disagree, and we're circling back to the same thing here, Sam, where that is so based on interpretation. Because yes, the characters are saying those things, but I am watching the movie in the context of being a human being and having my own thoughts and experiences and thinking, these guys are fucking losers. And yes, Jack Lemmon is having to go at Kevin Spacey, but Kevin Spacey is also incompetent at his job. They're all bad. And it's kind of like Jack Lemmon's telling him off is more of because he's so entrenched in this kind of like this race to make money, and the race is the word, kind of like this race to the win, to the payoff. And But do you think... Again, it all comes down to interpretation. I didn't think that Al Pacino's character was particularly and obviously not. And I think to aggrandize a character, there has to be an element of, boy, this guy's got it all together, and I would like to be this guy. And there is not 1 second in this movie where I want to be any of these characters.
Yeah,
and especially Al Pacino. I think he is But
do you? Yeah, I think it's fair. I think, but my retort, right, is that we don't. Is that the movie gets the movie making process is all about choices, and it's about making a range of choices, and those choices culminate in what we see on screen. And what we see on screen, I think, is what we have to go with. And the problem is that we don't see the consequences of these men's actions. And we spend a lot of time with them. And I don't think we don't really step outside of their experience. And so I think to really pin down and to focus on how pathetic they are, we would need, I think, in terms of the storytelling, a kind of outside perspective that really lands it. We hear from...
There's no normal person in this movie, is there?
There's no... Well, there's one.
There's no audience analog.
There's one.
No,
they
isn't.
try. No, hold on. If I could find the name of the actor, Jonathan Pryce, who's one of the saps who's getting done over, and this guy isn't a normal person either. This guy is a mess. He can't. He's nervous. He also wants to, but he talks about his wife. And his wife is the only normal person that we hear about from the whole movie, because, and maybe the guy, the other husband as well, who's like, no, thank you. But these are the type of characters, I think, that with a little bit more thought, and with real intentionality to show that these guys are pathetic losers, is that you bring in into some normality and say, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what is...
But we don't... And we don't get that because the movie is so internalized. I would say even Price, he's bought in. He has signed this contract with Al Pacino. He has bought into this idea that he can get rich. Yes, he's not a salesman, Sam, but it's all the whole of sales, the whole of commodification of land, the whole speculative market, it's all built on everyone believing that they can win and that they should win and that the system is set up for them to win. Every single person who's invested in that system is invested in some way. It's the salesman who thinks he can make it rich by selling the land. It's the idiot buying the land who thinks he can make money for nothing. And I think that's such a huge part of that character, which is done well. But it also kind of plays into, like you said, I think his wife is the only character who's like, no, get out of this deal, you fucking moron. That's our life savings.
What have you done?
And
what have you done?
But I think it's important for the movie not to have a normal character in it, because if you did, I think then it can't help but be a movie about the evils of capitalism. I think the only way to balance this movie on the knife edge like they do, or this story I should say, because it's based on a play, to balance this story on a knife edge is to have it take place in this insular world where nobody's saying, nobody is saying, like, you're all fucking losers, go home. Like, what are you doing? What are we doing? Get another job on Monday. It's fine.
It's all so important, and there are, there is an element of that heightened reality, isn't there, that we like to talk about. But I think, though, I mean, it's about interpretation, isn't it? It's about how you interpret what we're going on. The end of the movie kind of tops off because they steal, they steal the leads. Someone steals the leads, and it's not clear whether or not it's Lemon, but he's certainly, and this is where I think we just land. I think the landing of the movie is Lemon kind of knows he's done. He knows that people just like talking to. They're insane. They just like talking to salesmen, and Lemon falls for it. He falls for the fucking normies, as he would view them, who he used to be able to exploit, like Pacino is. And I think there's a kind of passing of the torch there, because Lemon says, fuck it, I'm going to put my hands up and I'll take the hit. I'll take responsibility. And, and I think that act and the kind of the way that those two characters interact, for me, it lands as you go on out there, you carry on, Pacino. I'm gonna pass the torch to you because I'm done. I'm a husk, but you can carry on doing this. It's maybe about how, again.
That's a weird read, but okay.
Well, how is it weird? What's the look? What's the look? How is it weird? Because Lemon gives him a look at the end.
Like
a very
the race
clear
is
look.
Run, the game is up.
No, I don't.
Like
think
they had till the end of the week to
up.
get a sale. No, everyone's game's up because Al Pacino's sale's fallen through. It had already nearly fallen through because this guy came in, and then we get to see Al Pacino manipulate this guy and berate him and lie to him. Like, it seems quite tacitly to delay him so that he can't cancel the contract because he'll run out of time. That seems to be the tacit reason for that. And then you get to see Kevin Spacey come in and blow it up, and this guy storms out, and Al Pacino's lost the sale. He's lost the Cadillac. And then Kevin Spacey, because he's attacked by Jack Lemmon, then he turns around and tears Jack Lemmon down because he's known this whole time that the people Jack Lemmon has got this contract with are full of shit. They don't have they've done this before. And so the end of the movie is kind of like Pacino's looking at Lemmon and saying, like, well, we all got fucked today. And that's what the look is that we all got fucked today.
Mm-hmm.
And cleverly, we've Ed Harris and Alan Arkin are out of the movie because it really does become about these three characters, and it's kind of like what has anyone got at the end of this movie? Nothing. No one's got any sales. No one's gonna have a job come Monday. Kevin Spacey doesn't have his leads. The only person who makes out from this movie with anything is Ed Harris, who got an undisclosed amount of money for these leads because Jack Lemmon's going to prison because he burgled the office.
Yeah. I
don't know. I think, again, interpretation is so key in movies like this. And do you know what's interesting, Sam? We've had very similar discussions and arguments about like auteur movies, like Wes Anderson movies and stuff, about what the intentionality of it is. And I think this is a frustrating movie because I don't know that the intentionality is there. And I think that's the problem. I think in a Wes Anderson movie, we can argue back and forth on the intentionality, but it's very intentional. You can argue about what what he's trying to say, but it's very intentional. This movie, we're arguing about, what are they trying to say? And I ultimately think they're trying to say, let's take this play that was successful and turn it into a movie so we can make money, and let's not worry about trying to say anything because we are adapting a fucking play into a movie to make some cash.
Yeah. In the way that a Wes Anderson movie is terrifyingly intentional, and
yes,
you're
I think there's not a lot of
Jesus
intentionality
Christ.
Here.
And that's what it comes down to. And so what's left then is what's on screen and how you interpret it and all the other things. And I think then for me, you have to take a step back and look at the context that this film was released in. There's something about the fucking 90s, man, where these middle-class white guys, they're so bored. They're so bored.
In 1992.
They're so bored that they need to create and invent things to be angstier about. And so a movie like this, and you'd say American Beauty, you'd say Office Space, you'd say Truman Show. Like, we're going to invent things that because we're living such comfortable lives, with our 2.4 children, with our lovely, charming wife or partner, with our massive house, that we're going to invent stories about the mundanity of this existence because there's nothing bad has happened to us in a long time. Now, that's a very broad view, but I think there is something to that kind of like malaise of modern existence that exists. And
yes,
this
you should Google this term, Sam. It's called the end of history.
The end of history. Yeah, thank you for that patronising fucking.
The Berlin Wall had fallen. Have you heard of the Berlin Wall? Google it while I'm talking. Educate yourself. Sorry, Sam is very uncouth. He didn't get a lot of schooling.
Thank you, Dave. Yes,
he works down the communication mines every day to put food on the table for his kids. What was my point here? So the Cold War has ended. The modern world, the connected world, where we've got telephones and TV, and the internet is just around the corner in 1992, and for all of that time, the Cold War has been in existence. We have been under threat of nuclear war from the Soviet Union. In 1992, suddenly it's gone, and it's like, what do we do with ourselves now? Our entire existence as white men was about beating the commies, and and capitalism shall triumph over communism.
Can I read you a quote? Can I read you a quote from Francis Fukuyama's 1992, same year as this? He says that and this as dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, not just the passing of a particular period of post-war history, but the end of history as such. That is the end point of mankind's ideological evolution and the universalization of Western liberal democracy, and get this, as the final form of human government. I mean, you can the fucking hubris of 1990s existence, and
it's quite phenomenal.
1990s
White man
America
in 1992. And we thought we had solved. We thought we had come to the end point of human ideological development. Like the end point, Sam. This is it. We can never improve on America in 1992.
Never mind.
I am amazed. I am amazed that person was not struck by a bolt of lightning as they were writing that. That is so insane. But also kind of like, I think does capture something about this is why in the late 90s, in the early aughts, like as this idea has matured and kind of like come into its own, you get movies like American Beauty, which I would love to do one day because I think that would be laughably trite.
I honestly.
And movies like Office Space and movies like Truman Show, like you say, movies
Fight Club.
Trying to invent. Exactly, Fight Club. Movies are trying to kind of invent something for white men to rail against because we no longer have the Soviet Union, and there is something there. I'm not sure this movie captures that completely.
Oh, I think that's completely wrong because this movie is. I said
completely.
Yeah, but I said this completely wrong because I think this movie is about is about trying to capture. It's trying to harness what we used to have, and I think that's where Jack Lemon's final kind of scene is so critical, because he's looking back and saying, "I've lost it," but the torch is being carried forward, and actually that we can carry on acting this way because, goddamn, we're men. We're fucking men. Like, that's the attitude, the masculinity, the toxic masculinity that runs through this movie. That can only come.
Literally doesn't have a woman in it.
No, that can only come, exactly. Literally, not even like it can only come from. It can only come from, I think, a sense of entitlement and comfort that the world, has was certainly not experiencing in the same sense that middle class America was, but importantly, hasn't since. Like the people who were in their 30s and 40s in the 90s are now the very same people who are pulling up the ladder and voting for governments that explicitly deny the type of redistribution and wealth sharing that these people benefited from in free universities, etc.
Who are 75.
I mean,
and that's
honest
all
to God.
Fascinating, Sam, and I think dead on. I think there is an element of truth there. However, 4 out of 5 stars. Good movie. I want to move on, and I want to talk about one or two quick things here now, because you haven't made it clear. Do you enjoy this movie, Sam?
I thought this was a very technically accomplished movie with toxic themes, and that I worry for anyone watching this who doesn't get, hopefully, the interpretation that these guys are dickheads, because I don't think a lot of people will get that.
Well, in support of that point, I've seen this movie before. I saw this movie 5 or 6 years ago, perhaps, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much on the second viewing, and certainly a lot more of the things that offended you so, just in case you've missed that, listener, just offended you so much, were certainly more prominent on the second viewing.
Have your views evolved, Dave? Have you become more enlightened?
You see, Sam, because when I first watched this movie, I had reached the ideological end point of movie watching, and therefore I couldn't improve upon. Would never be improved.
The natural form of human movie watching,
the natural form of human movie watching, which was to watch a movie called Glengarry Glenross, not really think about it because I was in my late 20s, and then enjoy it. I do think this is an enjoyable movie, but also, my last point, Sam, I think we are attaching way more significance to this movie than it deserves.
That's 100%
and that
true.
is from the second watch, where it's a fun movie, it's an interesting movie, it's maybe a bit atypical of movies of this era in the way it's so staid, and it's just a cast of shouty men chewing up scenery, but it is kind of an entertaining watch. And if you want super into political theory and economic wealth distribution, which you should be. Why are you still listening to this fucking podcast?
You could be literally richer if we tax the rich and redistribute the rest of us. So
there's a reason. There's a reason, even with all of these problems which we've outlined. There's a reason that this movie was so well received, and obviously so much of it's the cast. Now, quick fire round, Sam. Let's go through the actors in this movie, and I want you to tell me what their best movie is. Okay? Ed Harris.
Truman Show.
Ooh, good one. I was going to say The Rock, but Truman Show is good. I'd forgotten he was in the Truman Show.
This is hard. This is going to be hard. Okay, keep going.
Jack Lemmon.
Some Like It Hot.
Of course. I've got this the only answer. Surely.
Okay,
here's an interesting one. Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin
was in Beetlejuice, obviously. The thing about Alec Baldwin is his movie career is kind of odd.
He's kind of a supporting actor.
He played the fourth guy in a lot of movies. He didn't star in a lot of movies.
Yeah, I Hunt for Red October, maybe. I like him in Hunt for Red October. I know, I've got it. Boss Baby 2.
Did he come back for the second movie?
Probably. They
Fun fact, he did not do the TV show. They got a sound-alike. They got a sound-alike.
Hey, you've been watching.
He must have been paid. There's no way you don't get paid if they just do a spin-off of your movie.
He was probably a producer. All right, so who we got left?
Kevin Spacey.
Kevin
L.A.
Spacey.
Noire. Not his best performance, I wouldn't say, but I think the best movie he was in.
Well, I thought that's maybe a different thing then. Kevin Spacey. I like Usual Suspects. I have to say, I do think that's a.
I'd be interested to see how that holds up. I think American Beauty's out of it.
But yeah, in terms of his performance, though, I think probably that.
Probably, yeah. Usual Suspects is a good one. I think he is good in L.A. Noire, to be fair.
Okay, so what have we got left? Pacino.
Pacino is probably going to be the most interesting one. The Godfather Part 2.
Godfather Part 2.
I think is the answer.
You might say Scarface, but I think
might say Donnie Brasco.
I've not seen that, so I can't offer.
I think because it's so against what Al Pacino is doing in all of his other movies.
But probably in terms of if you're saying the best movie,
probably Godfather 2. It's got to be.
I think it has to be objectively because I don't think there is a. I just think that is maybe the best movie ever made, or at least in that list. In terms of his performances, though, I think I don't know. I kind of struggle with Al Pacino a little bit. I don't necessarily rate him that highly in every.
No, and I would agree
because I think he
plays the same character in about 45 movies,
and he's the same in this movie.
Which is why I would say Donnie Brasco. I think you should watch it actually, because it's kind of like it's Al Pacino doing the more realistic, washed-up mobster than he does in all of his other movies.
He's still playing a mobster, of course he is.
No, but there's some pathos to it, Sam. There's some pathos to it because he's not the guy from Scarface. He's not the Godfather. He's kind of like this, like schlubby loser, and there's something there, and
Heat.
What there's Heat, of course. Heat's excellent. I mean, this is the thing. What was that movie we did really recently? The
Insider.
The Insider. That was a good movie as well. Like Al Pacino's had a lot of really good movies, but a lot of the time, I would say, apart from The Godfather 2, which I think is why that's the answer, I think a lot of his movies aren't necessarily good because he's in them.
Yeah, I think...
If that makes sense. I think he's in a lot of good movies, but I don't think he's the reason they're good.
I think that's very fair.
Yes, and fair. I don't want to forget Alan Arkin, because I love Alan Arkin, but he's perhaps not the leading man that a lot of these other guys are.
No, Alan Arkin. He's in. He plays I think one of the parents in the Santa Claus movies.
Yeah, he won about an Oscar, I think, for Little Miss Sunshine in 2006, which I haven't seen.
Oh yeah, sure. Maybe he's also in good films. Let's not forget Christopher Price.
Well, I would say he's in a movie called Slums of Beverly Hills, which I recommended to you a couple of years ago. Which is a wonderful little indie movie from 1998 with Natasha Lyonne, and he's the dad in that, and it's very fun.
What a nerd. Let's not forget Jonathan Pryce, who is very, very fun in Pirates of the Caribbean in a massive wig. Good for you. Good for you.
Good for you. We should get that clip, by the way. I think we can use that. We say it every episode. Let's lead into the shock jock.
But only use it in a very, very genuinely positive way. Like, we're not using it in a sarcastic Christian Bale shouting
because
at
we're better than Christian Bale, Sam.
Good for you, Jonathan Pryce. Well done. You're fantastic.
Yeah. But I think we've just listed a load of better movies. I mean, Kevin Spacey's a bit of a...
Yes.
Part of me thinks we should just eject all the Kevin Spacey movies into the sun, and then part of me says, actually, like, 200 people got up every day and made coffees, not specifically 200 people making coffees and donuts, but people got up every day to bring coffee and donuts to those films, and maybe we shouldn't set fire to them all just because a reprehensible person was in the movie. Maybe we should just understand that he's a reprehensible person.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Someone getting up, making coffee every morning is a noble and
listen, Sam, we are
important.
Nothing if we're not a working class podcast. Okay?
100%.
Which is a very middle class thing to have, is a podcast, but we are our roots, and ultimately I'm always there for the guy bringing the coffee and the donuts. He's my guy. We're on a
gets
level.
Up at, he gets up
I
at
would
5
feel more
a.m.
comfortable with him than any of these fucking rich actor cunts.
Exactly. He has to travel to work. He has to get the coffee warmed up. He has to make sure that Al Pacino likes his coffee in a very specific way. You know, all of this stuff.
Yeah, Kent
but I
Brockman
think
wants his bear claw, or he will not go on.
he will not go on. I think what's important though to remember, Dave, is that coffee is for closers.
Coffee's for closers. I'm leaning back. Coffee's for closers.